Kia ora koutou. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with Janet Britz from First Capital Financial Services. This is another of our series of mobile expert interviews. I'm Bridget Romains from Mobile Relocation. We set expats and migrants up to thrive in New Zealand. And we all know that there's many moving parts to any relocation. So from time to time, we pull in experts from our network to talk through some of the real nitty-gritty issues around moving to New Zealand. This session today is particularly targeted at expats, migrants and returning Kiwis who have been working in the UK and are wondering about how they're going to get that nice juicy pension that's been building up back to New Zealand, or how they're going to manage it most efficiently. And Janet's an expert in that subject. So thank you for joining us today, Janet.
Thank you for having me, Bridget. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Right, I'm going to start really broadly at quite a high level. Can you transfer your UK pension to New Zealand, and why would you do that if you're moving here?
Yes, you can. Most of our clients do typically look to transfer it for consolidation purposes. Makes it easy to manage if all of your retirement savings are in one place and one geography. One thing to note is that you can't transfer all pensions. So some UK pensions need to stay in the UK, and those are typically government pensions like DHB or police pensions.
So how do people manage the ones that have to stay in the UK?
Typically, they look to leave them there and then gain access to them when they reach qualifying age, which is currently age 55, soon to be going up to age 57.
So it means that if they bring it to New Zealand, obviously they'll be working here, they'll have a KiwiSaver fund, and they also have their pension from the UK. Looking forward to quite a nice retirement.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what they'll do is, in the past, you used to be able to consolidate your KiwiSaver and your UK pension. Regulations have changed, where now you need to transfer your UK pension into a QROP scheme, and there's only 13 of them across New Zealand. And then they save towards your retirement, essentially, in combination with your KiwiSaver. QROP schemes have to adhere to HMRC's rules. So as they change retirement age, that's when the QROP schemes will then look to mimic that. But there is ease of access sooner. So age 55 at the moment, soon to be 57.
Right. Can I ask you a couple of technical questions? First of all, what does QROPS mean?
Qualifying Recognised Overseas Pension Scheme. It is a mouthful. Yeah.
Okay, great. And what are the key considerations for somebody who's thinking about moving their pension to New Zealand?
Well, as I mentioned before, so not all UK pensions can be transferred across. You also get different types. So you'd get what's called a defined benefit, which guarantees an annuity or a salary for the remainder of your retirement life, or a defined contribution, which mimics our KiwiSaver here in New Zealand. If you do have a defined benefit, you do need to receive financial or regulated advice from a financial advisor in the UK. They're seen as a gold standard, and typically before looking to transfer them across, you really want to be informed. So that would be the first key consideration. Transfer costs and fees are another one. Different pension providers have different entry and exit fees. So it's very wise to make sure that you're aware of the entry and exit costs if there are any prior. And then tax obligations. First 4 years, if you are a transitional resident here in New Zealand, you don't pay tax on the amount that you're transferring across. So really want to consider that, because the tax is a big thing when it comes to UK pensions.
So can I just clarify that? If you do it after the first 4 years and you're transferring, I don't know what, a couple of $100,000, let's be optimistic, you would have to pay tax on that.
Absolutely. And it's based on a sliding scale, the number of years that you've been here in New Zealand. Most of the information is publicly available on the Inland Revenue website, and I'd be happy to send you a link to that so that your viewers can calculate that. It's best to seek specialist advice from an accountant, though, if you are going into that grey area, because you could be forfeiting a big chunk of your savings in tax.
So the key message there really is do it within the 4 years, and then you don't have to be in the grey area.
Absolutely. And it's typically not the first thing that investors think about, right? They're moving abroad. The first thing you think about is where are my family going to live? Where are we going to live? What about work? What about school for the kids? And then in the third year, they decide, oh, maybe I should transfer that pension across. But on average, it takes about 6 to 9 months to transfer a pension. And that's where the time frame is really, really key, because they could be facing quite large tax obligations at that point.
Absolutely. So how does the process of transferring your pension work? If somebody knows nothing about it, can you just give a step-by-step, what should somebody do?
Okay. I like to call it simple but complex.
Yeah.
So what you'd need to do is figure out, firstly, who you'd want to transfer your pension to here in New Zealand. There are 13 different cure ops providers, and each of them are different in terms of the fees that they charge, the investments that they invest their clients' money in, and the service level that they provide their clients. Some provide financial planning, others just low-cost, do-it-yourself DIY platform. But typically, once you've decided who you'd like to move to, they get you to complete a one-pager form, providing the date that you arrived in New Zealand, your pension number abroad, who your pension provider is, and really finding out more details around how you're invested, potential costs or tax obligations that you might be exposed to. And typically the pension provider would do a comparison. So this is what would currently cost you to transfer your pension across. This is potentially what tax obligations you may face. If we were to invest it here in New Zealand, this is what it would look like. So the investor is making an informed decision. Once they've accepted that advice, the pension provider then takes control of all the administrative tasks. So they really act on behalf of the investor to liaise with the UK time zone, which is most cases quite late at night here in New Zealand, and releasing the funds and then bringing them across borders here to New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. So just to clarify a couple of points here that spring to my mind. So you once you've chosen your cure ops fund, they will do most of the admin work for you.
Absolutely. Some pension providers in the UK do prefer to often deal with their clients directly, in which case they then send either an online mail through the online portal platform, or directly email their clients. Any of the information is normally forwarded on to the cure ops provider here in New Zealand, who then acts on behalf of the client.
Right. Yeah. And another question I wanted to ask, but there's two parts to this. Firstly, how do people find out who these 30 cure ops providers are, and what are the key differences between them? You mentioned before, things about the way they manage their funds. Are there any other things people need to be aware of?
Yeah, so really good question. HMRC does have a link of cure ops providers worldwide. So anyone that is looking to transfer their pension from the UK across borders can hop onto the link, and I'd be happy to share that with you too. Some other key differences to think about would be currency. Some cure ops providers here in New Zealand do allow for investors to hold pounds. So essentially, you'd be liquidating the stocks that you hold in the UK, transferring pounds across to New Zealand, and then either having that in a cash account in pounds or investing in pounds. That's really good for currency risk, to hedge your own currency risk. Other pension providers make sure that you do convert into New Zealand dollars. So really key if you're wanting to maintain that British pound currency exposure, to make sure that the cure ops provider that you're transferring to does allow that for you. Other cure ops do allow for you to transfer the funds and then invest for the remainder of your transitional tax period at 0% tax, which most of them typically don't. They allow you to transfer the capital across as 0%, but then any interest that's earned on the investment is tax. So if you are looking to save tax efficiently, you would then look towards investing in one of those cure ops providers.
Yeah, I'm just hearing all the way through this that having tax advice alongside your pension transfer is pretty important.
Absolutely. Majority of our clients, we do work alongside their accountants when transferring funds across borders. And we do recommend that often if you are transferring large lump sums of money across, you do have advice over in the UK from an accountant and a financial advisor, and then here in New Zealand as well. There's a lot of moving parts, and you don't want to get yourself in a grey area.
Yeah, indeed. And it also springs to mind as we're chatting, can you explain the type of role that you play in this? We've talked about the mechanisms and the processes. What do you do in all of this?
My role is really making sure that, firstly, the client, if they do want to transfer their funds across and look to consolidate it, why? What do they want out of it? What is their end goal? Are they saving for retirement? Do they have, or have they taken out a loan from the bank to purchase a property here in New Zealand? And at age 57, they may then need to put down a lump sum payment, in which case that cure ops pension might be beneficial. So it's taking them through what's called a discovery process, or a fact find, and understanding who they are, what they have, and where they want to be, and then how I can help them best get there. We then structure portfolios depending on what they're looking to achieve, and direct them into different cure ops providers, depending on their situations and their end goals. And we facilitate the whole administrative process too. So that would be really making it as easy as possible for them, in terms of bringing their pension across, investing it here in New Zealand, and then making sure it's growing in accordance to what they'd like.
Great. And just thinking about timing, what's the optimal time for somebody who's an expat or a migrant or a returning Kiwi to start the process of talking to somebody like you, or even thinking about transferring their pension?
As soon as possible. Yeah, if it was me, I'd do it as soon as I landed in New Zealand. You can't do anything if you're still abroad. So
Good point.
you need to be on New Zealand soil physically in order for the pension process to start. But it is timely, it is complex. If you're not needing a financial advisor and you're choosing to do it on your own, there's long hours that you'd be on the phone to UK pension providers, and also the time zone and the documentation. So as I said before, I think it's 6 to 9 months on average for pensions to be transferred across, and they do require a lot of original documentation, such as birth certificates, passports. You don't want to get yourself in a situation where you're at the end of that transitional tax period and you potentially may need to pay tax just because of time delays.
Time, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As soon as possible from my perspective. Yeah.
Now, can I ask the real question, which is, typically, when do your clients come to you? Could you make any generalization on that?
Absolutely. Year 3 or 4, or nearing year 4.
Oh, really?
Yeah, most of, because it doesn't really come to mind, I don't think, when there's so many other aspects of moving countries to think about, as I mentioned before, schooling, housing, work. You don't typically think about your pension. It's an out of sight, out of mind. But yeah, it does get quite, because we don't have any control, coming back to it, we don't have any control around the time frame. So it puts a lot of pressure, but equally the outcomes may not be the best for investors if we're delaying it to the 3rd year. So really just spreading the message, making sure that everyone's aware of what a big difference that time frame or that transitional period does make for investors.
Yeah, it's an advantage that you can't afford to miss out on, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Now, Janet, is there anything else you want to add that you think people need to know about the pension transfer process, or any aspect of what we've discussed today?
Yeah, I think I definitely seek help from either a financial advisor and an accountant, or an accountant in that regard. The process is simple, but it is complex, and making one wrong decision, you could potentially face very high tax obligations. So it's just to be prudent, I guess. Be careful. Start the process early. That way you've got time to think about the decisions that you're making. And if you do think that there is an inkling or a chance that you might go back, possibly leave your pension and don't look to transfer it and then transfer it back, because that's where the IRD needs to report to HMRC for 10 years. So you could potentially also find yourself in a sticky tax loophole in that regard.
Great. Well, thank you, Janet. That's been really interesting. And I would also draw anyone who's listening's attention to Janet's work on LinkedIn. She's got some really great videos and deeper dives into some of the complexities of the topic we've talked about today. So if you have a bit of a look for Janet Britz on LinkedIn, I think you'll find some useful follow-up material there. And for those of you who will have obviously found this on our website, Janet's contact details will be in the post that goes along with this message. So if you want to contact her directly to ask any questions, I'm sure she would be very open to that. And we'll also include the links that Janet's mentioned in the blog that goes with this video as well. So you can find those there.
Thank you so much, Bridget.
Thank you, Janet. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and very educational.